If you read all 12 Cormac McCarthy novels, you will hear very little from McCarthy about his conception of God. But today, I am here to bring to you guys quotes and comments in the margins that are not available online. Whales and Men is McCarthy's unpublished screenplay, a screenplay he worked on after Blood Meridian at the peak of his writing powers. And the final draft is available online, but there's 4 or 5 earlier drafts available in the archives. And in these, McCarthy tackles God and language at a very deep level. And he asks us, you and I, quote, why do we feel so alien in this world? Isn't it in a very real sense because we are no longer here? Language is a way of containing the world. We were put into a garden and turned it into a detention center, end quote. McCarthy believes that language has degraded evil and that language is the ultimate evil. In an early draft of Whales and Men, McCarthy says, quote, there was no evil in the world until man sought knowledge. Right after this quote, in the margins, he comments on his own screenplay saying, quote, we were the serpent. The Bible was right. Evil is a man-made creation like Argyle socks and hydroelectric dams. And McCarthy here is evoking Genesis, is evoking the very classic idea, the Tao that is called the Tao is not the Tao. And McCarthy views language as a form of ontological mutilation. Shout out Patrick O'Connor, who I interviewed on the show. That's his term for McCarthy's conception of language. Because the awareness required to categorize, name, and derivate God turns the thing into a simulacra. And McCarthy asks us, quote, why would God name himself anyway? To distinguish himself for what? McCarthy has this conception of God being one energy. You could say that he's very agnostic. And McCarthy tackles this more and refines this in the Kukule problem, saying, quote, language had begun as a system for identifying and organizing the phenomena that make up the world. But now it's become a system for replacing those phenomena, end quote. And McCarthy knows that from the start, that first evil to not use language just to organize, but to continue it and move into simulacra and now simulation is going to be our end. Quote, we always knew our desire to be with God would finish us off, end quote. And in Whales and Men, McCarthy ties this all over to whales. And this is where I'm going to lose all my logic bros out there. McCarthy says that whales' brains are so big because they didn't stop at language. Language was a bad side quest on the tour. Whales aren't doing this dumb societal language power trip we're doing. They have huge brains and are so ephemeral so that they can contemplate God. McCarthy's idea, not mine, but it's a very strong one. McCarthy recently in that Krauss interview said that if humans didn't exist, math wouldn't exist. And through language, we have not just pulled ourselves away from God, but pulled away from each other as a species. Whales have this beautiful system of communication and vocalization with each other. And McCarthy says, quote, the pain of one whale is the pain of all. 1,000 miles across the sea, the outraged blood and nerve and muscle convey their agony unchecked. And that is their meaning, and that is the meaning, of their community, end quote. And one of the reasons I think McCarthy never published this screenplay is that a lot of people, when they hear this, like, yeah, so what? Low-level thinkers, humans on the growth path, figure this out. This isn't one of these occulted truths, but it's a truth that most people never get the most out of. Because to step toward this realization and to embody it is really the embodiment of chaos. McCarthy says, quote, what would happen if chaos should come? Would we be worse off? What if all the order were suddenly in abeyance? The skies given over to the access of sudden random moons. Everything mindless and migratory. So that all we knew to be was set aside. And we found ourselves dwelling in silent pandemonium. Would we be worse off? Would we be more damned under the transit of constellations unknown to us? What if we suddenly knew nothing at all? End quote. The unsexy, the non-biohack, growth hack aspect of reality are the spaces, the silence, the infinity in every moment. In listening to me right now, you've thrown yourself out of the phenomenological moment. And McCarthy in this text is dealing with the elemental aspect of water. I'm going to get into this in another video. But for instance, in No Country for Old Men, Sheriff Bell contemplates over a stone trough. It's a contrast of the longevity of equipment of stone, but also the change that we have undergone since it was created. In The Road, we have fire symbolizing one aspect and the other aspect being total darkness, total blackness, the end of the world. In Blood Meridian, we have these massive theories of knowledge, but they're contrasted through with barbaric violence. That's more of airy. And in Whales and Men, we are dealing with water, the emotions, feeling, and this lost part of ourselves, this silence, and then awareness. In Whales and Men, it's about, at some level, it's about these whale conservationists. We see something very similar in The Passenger. It's about deep sea excavations and this missing plane. But McCarthy says it all. I don't have the quote at the start of The Passenger. He's, the character talking about Bobby says he goes into the depths searching for a soul. And this is one of the elemental modalities that McCarthy likes to use symbolically. And another aspect that happened in the earlier drafts is McCarthy is playing with the concept of the wolf. We have the wolf in The Crossing, and as I talked about before, in the early drafts of The Crossing, McCarthy wrote it from the perspective of the wolf. And in Whales and Men, the wolf appears again, and McCarthy uses it as a tool to show that they have a deeper communicative capacity than we give them credit for, or even humans themselves, that they can communicate beyond the confines of their locality. We can't do that. I have to use a cell phone to do that. And a lot of this, at some level, the non-locality connects back to physics, right? Seemingly these things, and McCarthy contemplating this as an author, as an artist, is him trying to come to terms with these things. And so what we can get out of this is that we want to remove as much as possible the amount of simulacra between us and an object. For instance, I just read Whales and Men, and now I'm saying it to you through this microphone and camera, and now you're receiving it. It's a copy of a copy. Yet we do know its origins, and I'm not big enough for these ideas most of the time to be simulated into the matrix of consensual reality. But there are many things in our life that we don't even know the origin of it. I mean, if we think of religion and politics, these ideas, they are so far gone from actual objective reality that they are existing in a state of hyper reality now. And most of the time, those things are hollow and empty. And so what we can get from this is McCarthy favors contact, immediacy. This is why he doesn't like to discuss his writing and probably be hawked by fans, because that takes the immediacy out. Sitting in and doing all that, he would probably say is a waste of time. Are we wasting time here? Probably not. So if you guys have any further thoughts, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. I read all the comments. And thanks for going on this deep dive with me.